We're having a fair amount of difficulty making this turn signal switch lay down, and we believe we've got this isolated to a certain spot. I wanted to show you that. Of course, we took this cup off, the housing off, so that we could get a little bit better idea of how that thing was fitting on there, because this seemed to be just, you could get a little bit of movement out of this, and it seemed like it was binding up on this piece and this piece. So what I guess I didn't realize until now was that these grooves in here, I believe here or maybe here, I'm not sure, they need to fit down, they need to lay down on these pieces here. And these pieces are part of the housing that goes on, you know, all the way down to the base of the steering gearbox. This thing can come off if we remove some more items, but we don't want to do that. But these were a little bit deformed, and they weren't really in line with the rest of this circular pattern here. You could look straight down and see that these were a little bit out to one side, and there's also some sharp edges here, and so there's been some work, if you want to call it that, done on these pieces, and that's what I believe is keeping that from keeping this turn signal switch from laying down. So I believe it's catching somewhere in here, because the issue is that this slot for the turn signal lever is not going down low enough in the housing to allow me to put that lever in there. So it's riding too high in the cup and too high in the housing, and that's causing the issue. So we are going to work on trying to get these to fit onto the back of these, this turn signal switch. So it's taken quite a while, but we want to try and get this right, and hopefully you don't have these problems, but if you do, then you'll know what I ran into, and hopefully this will help save you some time. Okay, I wanted to take a minute to show what I was doing here. Some of this took a little bit longer than I wanted, and that is these terminals had to be removed from the connector, and you can see how there's a slot on the top, and basically those things get shoved in there like that. This is also something that requires a little bit of finesse. Let's see here if I get a clear picture of this. Like guess it only goes in one way. Thank goodness, like that. And then it'll get in there so far and then lock with that tab. And that's also what you're trying to push down when that tab is in place and you're trying to remove those. That's where you stick a little probe in there and try to reach into the correct length and push that down. So when you are doing this, you shove it in, probe it, push it down, and then pull it out. If you don't pull while you're, or if you don't push in while you're trying to bend that tab down, then you're going to have an issue with that tension being on the top part of that tab there. So when you're going in, you got to bend that up a little bit so that when you shove it in, it'll snap shut. So most of these were pretty good. There was one that I wanted to show you because I was having problems with it. Or is it? No, that's not it. How many more have I got? No. Well, obviously it's the horn one. So I shoved this one down a little bit too far. That tab is down below the level of that, and it's difficult to get in there and pry that up. It's also difficult to get under it this way because that terminal is bent down. So my solution was to get a needle and first of all see if this was small enough to get under there, which it wasn't. I don't want to really shove it down. So what I did was went this way. Make sure it's in there toward the center. A little bit more grabbing power. Grab my center. Oh, there's a little bit. And hopefully that bumps it down. Come on, baby. Helps to talk to it a little bit. To the end of my tape here. I worked on the last one. What I'm trying to do is stick it in there to shove down on that. This one's being stubborn. A little bit of tension on that. And then try to grab that bad boy. The reason I use a needle is because That's small enough to get in there. Well, I think I'm gonna have to work on this a little bit. Okay, we're finishing up the wiring on this first generation turn signal switch install, and we saw that the terminals, spade terminals on this part of the connector were looking pretty bad, so we went ahead and pulled those out individually and then hit them with a little bit of sandpaper and plugged them back in. We also noticed when we were taking this out that one of these wires was cut right at the end of that terminal, and that serves the left-hand turn signal. Let's see here, that would be the left-hand turn signal. So on the left hand and the right hand, when they come out, they split. One goes to the actual turn signal up front of the vehicle, and the other one goes to the indicator lamp that's in the dash cluster. So we don't know why they cut that, but since we were in there and we had that terminal out already, we wanted to strip that wire back, solder on a new wire, and then we also like to double shrink those to keep all the water out. Then we kept a little bit of length and just wound it up, make sure that the end is not going to touch on anything that it shouldn't. And we'll worry about the left-hand turn signal at another time. But that'll keep us from having to pull that out later. We also wanted to make sure that we try to keep as much water out of there as possible. And one thing I like to use is this silicone paste. It's a dielectric grease, and you just shove it all in there and it displaces water and make sure that it also keeps the oxygen off of those terminals so that it doesn't oxidize as quickly, and does pretty good. So that's where we're at on Frank's wiring. There's also an example of why sometimes these things take me a lot longer to do than I anticipate. When I run into this stuff, I don't want to add to the problems that are there, like cut wires. I want to try to get it fixed up as good as possible, and a lot of times that just takes a lot more time. For example, this turn signal switch, that's probably a job that by a flat rate manual would take maybe an hour. It would pay an hour, but I have sure put a lot more hours into it than that. But I also learned a lot, and hopefully that will help other people. This lower cup was loose. Let's see if we can zoom out a little bit. The steering wheel was loose, and a lot of that had to do with this housing here. It was not fitting on tight to this part, which is the housing that goes over the steering column. And then this turn signal was loose. They had a Mickey Mouse switch in that. All that stuff took time. But the thing that took the longest time on this was for me to figure out where this turn signal switch was binding. Now, even now, it's a little bit higher than I like it in that hole, but it is clearing it, and it's still nice and tight. But what I didn't realize until I did this job was that turn signal switch, the plastic part of it, has to fit in tight on the prongs that come up off of this piece here. So the housing goes down, turns, locks in, and that's all got to be tight. We covered that earlier. And then after that's in there, the turn signal switch lands on top of that, and it also helps to lock that all in. So all those things help make this tighter. Of course, those bearings weren't bad, but they sure were like they weren't greased very well. So there's no way to really grease them. They should last the life of the turn signal switch. But I thought that the turn signal switch bearings were bad, and they weren't. So here's a lot better. You know, of course, there was a lot of pieces missing in there. And that's it.